I think it's time. Can I say so? Right? Everybody's here. Good morning, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us for this insightful panel discussion on promoting pedagogical approaches to promote academic integrity. It's great to see you here, all committed professionals. And I'm Professor Cezene Topkaya from İzmir Democracy University. I was a member of Çanakkale University for 20 years before I moved to İzmir to work at another university, and I'm proud to be here, and I am proud to be a part of this team, very dynamic and very diligent. So, I'm excited to introduce our panel discussion, panelists. First, we have Professor Mary Davis. Indeed, you already heard the introduction to her before her keynote speech, but I'd like to just remind you a couple of things about her background. She has dedicated her research and practice to academic integrity for the past 20 years. She's the academic integrity lead at Oxford Brookes University in the UK, where she oversees policies, procedures, guidance, and resources on academic integrity for all students and staff. She has several roles in different organizations and boards. And also her focus is on inclusive educational approaches to academic integrity. Joining us as well is Associate Professor Dr. Uslu from Çanakkale University from the Department of Educational Sciences. Since earning his PhD in 2015, Dr. Uslu has focused on higher education policy and management. He conducted research on academic intellectual leadership during his visit to the University of Sydney, Australia, and led a Turkish team in the international project Academic Profession in the Knowledge Society, which involved over 30 countries. His research interests include digitalization in university management, the sociology of the academic profession, ethics in science, plagiarism policy, and academic integrity in open science. Joining us as well is Dr. Özgür Çelik, an English as a foreign language instructor at Balıkesir University, Turkey. His research centers on English language teaching, academic writing, academic integrity, including developing policies and tools to promote honesty. Dr. Çelik is an active member of the NIE, European Network for Academic Integrity, and contributes to various working groups within the organization. Well, after these brief introductions, we're going to begin our discussion. We have four major questions to explore today. First, we'll look at the evolution of the pedagogical approaches to academic integrity and its historical context with respect to countries represented by our panelists here. Then we'll discuss effective methods for teaching academic integrity, considering different variables such as age or different educational levels. Following that, we'll evaluate how we can measure that we're successful in helping learners learn academic integrity. And finally, we'll explore how academic integrity intersects with ethical approaches and ethical thinking in pedagogy. We have approximately 5 to 7 minutes to discuss all these questions, and we're going to have a 10-minute Q&A session following the discussion. So let's begin with our first question. The evolution of academic educational approaches to academic integrity. And I'd like to start with you, Dr. Mary Davis. Would you like to share your thoughts and insights about it?
Okay, thank you. Can I just check?
The microphone. Yes, please.
Thanks very much. Yes, so as I was saying earlier, apologies for any repetition during this panel. I've been working in the area of academic integrity for about 20 years. And going back to that point, I don't think we were even using the word or term academic integrity. Everything was about plagiarism. And I published a paper called Plagiarism Education. So which sounds so out of date now. I think going back to that point, there was very little in terms of pedagogy or also understanding what academic integrity was. And so historically, I think that has gradually evolved. And at least in my setting in the UK, there is much more of an educational approach to academic integrity. There's still a punitive one, but I think there is more education. I would also say, we have moved on from calling everything plagiarism. Sarah Eaton calls this era the post-plagiarism era, right? So we're now looking more holistically, more broadly, and also new kinds of academic conduct problems have come up. For example, falsification. If I go back 20 years, falsification was not really coming to the fore, but now there's a lot of a problem of research that isn't real, using false data, or using AI to generate something that isn't real, or any use of falsified references. So I think that's a more recent concern. But I would just say, in summary, that we've gone through a lot of different changes, but academic integrity will keep changing. I don't think we're going to get to a point where everything sort of stays the same. It's really important to be aware of that.
All right. You mentioned that, of course, when you're making references to your own setting, basically. So, do you think there are certain cultural and institutional factors that have influenced the change in our understanding of it and how we approach it?
I'm sure that's the case, and of course there's been a lot of research that's looked at the influence of culture. I think it's culture and sort of the institutional approach. I think that we need to look at a range of influences, because there's never just sort of one variable that determines the approach. But in terms of culture, I think in some cultures, for example, whistleblowing is considered a very negative thing. In the UK, I think people are a bit nervous about it, but there isn't such a sort of definitely you can't do that in the UK. It's not like that. I think people are willing to do whistleblowing as one example of I think the cultural difference.
Thank you. And Dr. Su, can we hear your insights now and how this has played out in Turkey?
Okay, hello everyone. I can see in Turkey, we don't have a clear approach, pedagogical approach to teach or enhance academic integrity in our own society and also educational community. As many of you said, we have still in the punitive era focusing on plagiarism, not including other types of academic integrity issues or mis issues like publication, falsifications, or there are lots of types of, you already know, different kind of problems, ethical problems in academia, even among university students. So, and we look at historically to the Turkish case, we can see there is a law of higher education. We call that 2547 number law, and it says only if you plagiarize, you should be banned from university jobs. There is no other definitions we have. When we look at the educational side, we can see in YÖK's regulation about education and teaching in the university, it says only there is a punishment for students if they cheat in the exams. There is no other kind of definition. So, and cheating, what kind of cheating? Looking next guy, near to you during the exam, or making a plagiarism from other sources, or using AI nowadays. There are lots of different types of definition, but we don't have any clearly in our regulations or law. So this creates a kind of punishment era but what we will punish at that? What is the case? How we can assess the case by case? There is no policy guideline. We are lucky in China because Salim Raza started to arrange a kind of policy guideline. What kind of ethical problems? How can we assess? What could be the educational aspects, for example, in China? Because as far as I remember, Salim's documents foresee a kind of training session for the students at the beginning. If they continue, then start to punish them. I think this is a good approach. We need to evolve this approach to the Turkish universities as much as we can. So this is the historical nowadays case for Turkey. On the other hand, when we look at our cultural roots, Turkish people mostly dealing with quantitative aims. In each time, our academic policy makers put higher and higher number of some criteria to promote or move on your academic career without considering quality side. This creates a kind of mind barrier among Turkish academics. We have to complete these quantitative criteria to reach out our next level in our career without considering quality. So I am sorry to say that, really sorry, but Turkey is the second country having publications in false or predatory journals in the world after Nigeria. So this is the result. If we do not consider the quality sides and just focusing on quantity side, this creates another problem among academics. This is, like say, this is my definition, Super Mario game for us. Without considering quality, academic integrity, just meet the certain number of criteria. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So it seems that Turkey, from the perspective that you have just outlined, is in the academic integrity era. And China at the institutional level, attempts and endeavors seem to be individual ones rather than collective ones. And we have just a top-down regulation that covers only plagiarism, and it's for the academics. All right, fine. Now, can we learn your perspective now?
Thank you, Hocam. Before going into details about Turkey, maybe I can build on various analysis, great analysis of general evolution of academic integrity globally. We can look at this topic from maybe different perspective. For example, when we look at academic integrity's evolution from pedagogical perspective, academic integrity transformed from a rule compliance issue to a teaching learning issue. Salim Hocam showed Trisha Bertengard's two great questions yesterday. Before we were asking how do we stop students from cheating, but now we are trying to ask how do we make sure students are learning. I think this is a very nice pedagogical shift in terms of academic integrity. If we look from a stakeholder perspective, before academic integrity was seen as a student issue, there were rules and it was the students who had to obey these rules. But now we are embracing a multi-stakeholder perspective, and Mary really talked about that. It's all everybody's responsibility, all stakeholders' responsibility. Also, it's worth mentioning the technology's role in changing the evolution of academic integrity. And I think the emergence of text matching tools is a significant milestone in academic integrity, because before text matching tools, it was very difficult to detect plagiarism. So plagiarism was not the case, maybe, but text matching tools made the detection easy, and the shift quickly focused on plagiarism after the text matching tools. So in the evolution of academic integrity, I think the the most important factor was the emergence of networks such as ICAI or E9. They significantly changed the course of academic integrity because before academic integrity rose on the shoulders of individuals who were few, but after the emergence of networks, academic integrity was powered by a collective effort. This is what we don't have in Turkey. We just have Salim Razi in Turkey, and he himself acts as a network, but of course it's not enough for the Turkish context. Our institutions are still struggling with the rule compliance approach. We are still in Turkey, we are still asking, how do we stop students from cheating? Yeah, that's the main problem in Turkey.
All right, thank you so much. So Dr. Jacobs emphasized the shift to the educational approaches globally, but maybe not in Turkey, but globally. And I think it's time to move on to our second question, which is about the effective educational approaches to teach academic integrity. And Dr. Usman, I'd like to start with you now.
Sure.
All right, please.
Okay. Time to time, term to term, I taught scientific methods courses in undergraduate and postgraduate degree programs, and we have only 1 or 2 big topics related to academic integrity, but most of my students says when we define plagiarism, oh, sure, we always hear this word, plagiarism, but at the first time, we understand what it means. Then we try to explain them how they can avoid from plagiarism situations. But most of them, maybe we forget our own studentship period, wants to deal with this situation without giving too much efforts. So they always listen to, in my classes, the topic related to how we can use technology-based tools to move on their essays or other kind of homeworks. But again, sorry to say that none of them keep in their mind what is the plagiarism. They mostly keep the tactics, and how can you use these new tools to create some kind of easy homework or something like that. On the other hand, this is my personal belief, we should consider very holistically how we can teach academic integrity to the students, maybe not only to the students, to the academics. So there are lots of different approaches, as you already know. But I think the first point in terms of pedagogical approaches, we need to give a clear message what could be the ethics of science. There are lots of characteristics and features like being honest, having a courage, or something like that. These are actually a kind of characteristics of being good people. So I think the starting point is how we can define good people and what will be their specifications. Then we should move on the academic integrity aspects, giving some extra responsibility to students. This creates a kind of easy steps. If students embrace this approach, they want to learn more and act then with these new responsibilities. This is my personal. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So at higher education level, you try to frame the question in relation to higher education and how certain courses can be used to instill academic integrity in our students, as far as I understand, that you have given us certain strategies and tactics that we might use in implementing an educational approach to academic integrity. All right, now Dr. Chidi, I'd like to turn to you and ask you your own experience, because we do know that in your dissertation, you also worked with secondary school students. So probably you have now enough experience to tell us what worked, what didn't work in those age groups or educational levels. And of course, together with some other information that you have gathered from other research.
I think this is the toughest questions, how to teach academic integrity effectively, and I'm not sure if we can do that because it's really hard to teach academic integrity effectively based on my experience. But the good thing is that we started asking this question. This is a good point, I think. I'll start with the general perspective, and I'll speak from the Turkish context. This is the problem in our country. Academic integrity, maybe this is the maybe other countries may share the same problem. Academic integrity doesn't belong to any discipline, but it's a component of all disciplines. So here there comes this question: whose responsibility is to teach academic integrity at our schools? I don't know what's it like in other countries, but in our country there's this thing: if it's not my responsibility, it doesn't bother me. First, if we want to teach academic integrity, we need to clearly define whose responsibility is this. And in my experience, in my PhD dissertation, I worked with young students, high school students. We tried to create a culture of academic integrity with a longitudinal study. It took for 1 year. And we had many initiatives to teach students academic integrity, and we saw that age is an important factor. The age of the students is an important factor in teaching academic integrity. For example, students having difficulty in understanding the concept of plagiarism because they don't have foundational knowledge. For example, they lack knowledge in copyright, giving credit, acknowledgement, textual ownership. Due to their age, they are more inclined to understand the ownership of concrete objects, and they have difficulty in understanding the ownership of abstract things such as ideas, opinions. So when they don't have such a foundation, they're having difficulty in understanding, for example, what plagiarism is. We need, I think, some strategies that vary according to the age of the students, maybe. So this maybe might work. Sarah, in her keynote, mentioned the school of thought yesterday, the differences between the approaches of Donald Mackay and Rebecca Howard. I like Rebecca Howard's framework. She mentions that ethical, mechanical, and rhetorical teaching. I think this might be implemented to teaching of academic integrity. Maybe at early ages, students might start with ethical issues, and then we may shift our focus to mechanical issues such as citation styles, etc. And then we can move forward with the rhetorical issues because students are gaining an authorial identity. This might be a solution maybe in teaching academic integrity.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. So you started off by saying that it's difficult to answer how we should really teach academic integrity, and you raised some questions indeed. But at the end of the day, we have some certain strategies that we may rely on. Thank you so much for your insights. Okay, now I would like to hear Professor Davis. During your keynote, you really framed the institutional approach in which you created, still implementing in your own institution. But of course, you may have some personal strategies as well. So we want to hear the institutional one again. If you would like to give more details with, and how about your own institutional ones? And plus, you're interested, your research is focuses on implicit aspects of academic integrity. So, for example, how do your strategies adapt to inclusion and inclusivity?
Okay, there's a lot of questions there.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. I will start by just sort of summarising the institutional approach to teaching academic integrity, which is through a course that I led the development of that is compulsory for all students. And thank you, Lauren, for the question about whether it really is completed by all students. We try to ensure that, but we don't have 100% completion. That's because we can't actually stop students getting their grades and not doing the course. But we push it, we promote it, we have it on the students' set of courses as one that they need to do. So we have that. I was also asked, I think in the break, about how long that course is. It's only an hour. We didn't make it a long course, but we made it so that students would have an introduction. But of course, that's not the only thing. And I completely agree with Barishi's comment that any approach to teaching academic integrity needs to be really holistic. So it's not just that course. In addition to that, there's always induction. So we always have academic integrity as part of induction materials that don't have to be completed before the student starts their course. It can be over the first few weeks. But there's I give live sessions as well as recordings to explain about how academic integrity is followed at the institution and the expectations for students. I then ensure that academic integrity is in the module handbooks. So guidance about academic integrity is in every module, every course that the student's taking, with guidance to use links to find more information. Then we have a dedicated team. So our academic development team is there to support students with any academic sorts of needs. And that's a way to address your question about inclusion. So we have the two teams, the academic development team, which is for all students to gain further support. They can book a tutorial, take a course. The academic integrity courses are the most popular for students to do and have a one-to-one tutorial. There's also an inclusive support team, which is for students with identified learning needs, and they will also work individually with students, particularly about any concerns with academic integrity. But I also wanted to raise, going back to the holistic view, I think one of the most important things that I've been able to introduce at my institution is training for staff. So that's actually the starting point, making sure that staff are aware of academic integrity. So when new staff join, I run induction to academic integrity at Oxford Brookes. I get them to reflect, first of all, on what they do in their own research, teaching and practice to follow academic integrity themselves. So what do you do when you're doing your research? How do you think about those ethical questions? What do you do when you're teaching and you're using sources? How do you credit them? What do you do if you have overheard someone talking about something and you use that idea? You know, so I'm trying to get them to think a little bit outside the box. How do you, in your own work, demonstrate good practice and academic integrity? So I run those sessions for induction, and then also when we have our postgraduate certificate of teaching for new staff, I give sessions on that as well to get staff to engage more. So there's different opportunities as well as lots of guidance for staff, lots of resources, which I feel is really essential. If you want students to learn about academic integrity, they need to learn from lots of different places and from the institutional resources, but crucially from the staff who are teaching them every day.
All right, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experiences. And as far as I understand, we all agree that institutional, or rather some meso-level initiatives are important to instilling an educational approach to teaching academic integrity, as far as I understand. And you also talked about, for example, with reference to your question, who should teach academic integrity? You, I think, gave a response to this by starting with training the staff there. Probably we need to start from a holistic perspective there. Fine, thank you so much. All right, now we're going to move on to our third question, which is about the evaluation of the effectiveness of these educational approaches. For example, are there any methods or metrics that we may rely on that are proved to be reliable and valid? And in your own experiences, again, in your own context, what have you used? If you've ever used any metrics or methods? All right, well, this time I'm going to start with Erin, with you. All right, okay.
Okay. I think it is really useful to keep statistics on how students are engaging with academic integrity and its effects. So one thing we can easily do is monitor the completion of that academic integrity course. Also, I talked earlier in my keynote about how we're approaching students with minor breaches in their first year. They do this, we call it GAP, Good Academic Practice Training, try to fill the gaps. We monitor after they've completed that training if they have any further breaches. And as I said, so far, in the 2 years we've been running, students who've done that mandatory training don't have any further breaches. So there's really good outcome there that's working. That's not to say we've stopped all academic conduct breaches. There are still many of those we'd like to keep trying to address. But in my role as academic integrity lead, I have access to all of the breaches that are recorded. Institutions need a good recording system for to analyze the trends. What kind of breaches becoming more common and who's doing them. That helps to address the overrepresentation question, because we need to act on anything where we can see there's more students at a certain level. Keep ensuring that support is in place. I would say a particular pinch point is the international postgraduate students that we need to give additional support. So we have brought more into the courses, particularly masters in business, masters in areas of healthcare, where we recruit a very large number of international students who are quite new to academic integrity in our institution. They need more support, so that's how we reacted to that data.
Thank you. So you say that the training courses can be used to look at to check the effectiveness of the approaches you're following. In other words, creating a feedback loop and at the same time a monitoring system. It's to work. All right, thank you. Dr. Shikho, what are your perspectives on this issue?
I have seen many fascinating academic integrity initiatives, and I've seen some evaluation studies of these initiatives. And most of these studies, the evaluations of these studies were describing the process, the narrative studies. So I understand the challenge in evaluating the effectiveness of these initiatives, because these initiatives are context-bound. What works in a context may not work in a context. This is what creates the challenge. So for this reason, we have difficulty in building upon the successful initiatives, because there are many variables that affect the process, and these are all sensitive to the context. There may be two ways we can evaluate effectiveness of such initiatives from a positivistic perspective. We may just judge if they are effective or not at the end of the process, but rather we can adopt a more naturalistic perspective just to see what works and what doesn't work during the process. So this is what we did in our PhD dissertation. We implemented a one-year program, but we didn't judge the program at the end. We didn't adopt a positivistic perspective. We looked at the process and we tried to explore what facilitated the process and what were the barriers for this process. So I think in the evaluating of such initiatives, maybe naturalistic program evaluation designs can tell us much from positivistic metrics.
All right, thank you, thank you. So your emphasis was on more the naturalistic, the qualitative perspective that we need to our approach that we can take up to understand whether this initiative is effective or not. All right, and Dr. Su, you're on.
Okay, now I remember one of my own study. Nearly 10 years ago, I presented one conference paper in Budapest, and I looked at what kind of ethics of science educational programs going on around European countries 10 years ago. I am sure many things already changed, but this study showed me a very different kind of example at that time. Finland, for example, I am sure they are still using the same way, give responsibility to one university, create online education program about ethics of science, and all postgraduate students in the country, not depending on their own institutions, go this online education and got this education in the internet. At the end of this education program, of course, they have to take a written exam, multiple choice exam. I am not sure this is a good way to understand the effectiveness of such kind of online education. Being an online education is another problem, rather than face-to-face. On the other hand, when we consider paper-based or summative assessment, is not the correct way. I agree with Özgür. We look at during the process development and formative assessment tactics could be better to assess the effectiveness of any kind of training about academic integrity or ethics of science anyway. So, in terms of technicality, we should consider scenario-based approaches to assess what students can understand in different scenarios. For example, plagiarist academics. For example, contract cheating students. On the other side, maybe copy-paste homework preparation. There are lots of kind of different things we can make a new scenarios. On the other hand, we should also give some basic responsibilities during the courses, during the education about academic. For example, we can say to our students, let's collect a simple quantitative data using interviews or other things. Or let's apply this basic survey or questionnaire to create short quantitative data. Then we can ask them to ensure their quantitative or qualitative data's validity and reliability during the courses. So, practice-based approach, scenario-based or problem-based approach, and also formative assessment plus summative assessment should be used together. Yeah, this is my personal idea.
Thank you for sharing your point of view. And as far as I understand, now we have to use a mixed methods approach as much as possible. Statistics do help. For example, if we're together with a large number of students, we need to track their development. But also, it may be in small cases, we have to rely on more qualitative data using different strategies here. All right, now this brings us to the last question that we're going to be answering. Dr. Uslu mentioned the significance of starting with some values in the first place that indeed contribute to the formation of a good person.
Yeah.
All right, so indeed this brings us the idea that we need to start thinking about ethical values or ethical thinking that we have to instill alongside academic integrity and values of academic integrity. So now my last question is indeed about this one. How do academic integrity and ethical approaches intersect Maybe we can now take a look at that. Appreciating shall we start with you?
Sure, thank you, Hocam. We generally associate academic ethical thinking or ethical decision making with academic integrity, but it is more than that. It is a critical skill that we all should have in our personal, professional, or academic life. In Turkey, we have values education program for more than 10 years, right? 20 years. I have seen some program evaluation studies of this program, and the common thing in the studies says that the program failed because teachers see values education as a course they should deliver, and students see this values education program as a course they should learn. So the ultimate purpose of this program is to help students gain ethical decision-making skills, ethical thinking skills through teaching the values to teachers. But this is the problem. Both teachers and students cannot internalize the program. For example, let's say students learn how to respect their peers, how to respect their friends at that course, but in the break of that course, they are kicking each other. So it doesn't work. And I believe that ethical thinking or ethical decision making should be taught in the course of life, not just as a course. A professional teacher, a good teacher, should take every opportunity to teach ethical thinking to their students in the course of life. I guess this is called opportunistic approach or something like that. Yes, this will be more effective in terms of teaching ethical thinking.
Thank you so much. I'd like to say a couple of things about the programs that you did in Turkey. I think the problem rather lies in the fact that the learning outcomes are not salient at all for different courses and different subjects. So if they were more observable and stated definitely and exactly in our programs, probably our teachers and our course designers and other material designers will do their best to help the learners achieve our learning outcomes. So there are huge gaps in our curriculum instruction design. All right, so Dr. Uslu, can we hear your
Okay. It's interesting for me because nearly 5 years ago, your Council of Higher Education created a kind of new teacher education programs for any departments, from language teaching to education psychology, and they put nearly 5 years ago one new course. The name, of course, Moral and Ethics in Education. So during this course, I taught 1 semester or 2 semesters, I'm not sure, and I realized that having a high-level moral approach is must criteria to ensure ethical behaviors. On the other side, I can say moral side is a bit common aspects, while ethics aspects dealing with the scientific issues related to being honest, having a courage, and or giving a trust to others, a kind of characteristics. So I can basically say, without having a high morality among our students, we cannot ensure ethical thinking. So where we should start, as you said, we have a very good program, values education. If we achieve to educate our students at the beginning of primary schools, early ages, if we continue to feed their values, as you said, in different cases, showing good examples, when they arrive to university level, we already ensure ethical thinking and behavior types. Then it's easy to teach such kind of community education how they ensure academic integrity or ethical standards in their own. Even after their graduation, it becomes more important because they will continue in their work life after graduation. If they ensure this ethical behavioral or thinking style among our students, when they graduate and then start working, they enlighten their colleagues too. This is the case, Alice.
Thank you so much. You made a distinction between moral values and ethical thinking and ethical approaches. And you say that they're interconnected and interdependent, definitely. But we must start with moral values, and then we have to build up on the values there to develop ethical thinking and ethical approaches in our students. And Dr. Davis, do you agree with this approach? That's the very first question I'd like to ask. And what is your understanding of the intersection of the ethical approach and ethical thinking?
Okay, so in my context, we certainly don't have a course that's designed to help students develop good moral behaviour. I think it's very interesting. I mean, it might come into something students are studying around global citizenship, for example, as and there's also a lot of interest in following the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, education for fairness, and that there's a lot of interest that's coming into a lot of programs. I was trying to think, what do we do in my institution in terms of ethical teaching within academic integrity? And actually, the course that I developed to help students with their use of artificial intelligence is actually called Ethical Decision Making with AI. I didn't call it Academic Integrity in AI. I thought ethical decision making is a much more practical way of trying to engage students in a course to develop what they're doing and to see how they'd be using their ethical judgment and being guided. I was also thinking how we define a student's ethical or unethical approach. And in our academic conduct breaches, we actually have one that's called unethical practice, and that's mainly for students who haven't got ethical approval to carry out research. So if they're doing primary research with human participants, they have to go through an ethical approval process, and if they hand in work where clearly they're drawing on something that they've done with human participants and they haven't got ethical approval, then that would be a potential breach. So we do try to guide students on unethical practice with that. But another thing that I think is also now being built in much more to our courses is its focus on professional ethics. So what kind of ethical knowledge needs to be developed to help students move forward into careers. So depending on the program, thinking about the kinds of career choices they may have, some of them at least, to consider, what's the importance of ethics in a scenario for an engineer who's going to be building bridges, for example, to have adequate knowledge to ensure safety, right? That's such a primary concern that the bridges are going to do that. I mean, we collected lots of examples of this, and I'm sure that's something others are doing. Examples of people in professions don't have genuine qualifications, who didn't pass their exams, who cheated in some way, and then actually caused damage or death as a consequence. There's lots of examples of that are really powerful. And I think the main thing there is when students have an opportunity to discuss this kind of example, the airline pilots who fly planes without having the adequate qualifications or falsified documents and then crash. That's the kind of thing that students wake up and think, gosh, yeah, so ethics is really important need to know about this, and it impacts our present as well as our future.
All right, thank you so much. So you have emphasized the significance of ethical decision making and how it relates to professional ethics indeed. So again, the societal impact of academic integrity, it's quite apparent, I guess. It's very obvious. Thank you so much. Well, we have run out of time. I'd like to thank all the panelists here for sharing their valuable insights. And if I may, I'd like to get a couple of questions from the audience. I do know that we're over time, but can we?
Okay, maybe we can.
Maybe only one. Thank you so much. Okay, maybe only one question. We have covered a lot of ground during the past 40 minutes. Thank you so much for this.
It's not a question, really.
All right.
It's a comment, an added comment I'd like to share that relates to Dr. Chevik's highlight about the importance of age and importance of ethics, mechanics and rhetorics in teaching academic integrity. Several years ago, my primary school daughter dwelled into preparing the PowerPoint presentation for her first time about a region in Turkey. And as a parent, I saw it as an opportunity to help her to teach how to cite web sources. And the moment I opened the web pages, she was, no, we can't do that. And it was clear from her comment that her primary school teacher had done a great job to instill the foundations of academic integrity in terms of the ethical decision making. But it was also clear that she needed the mechanics, and she wasn't aware that there are steps and there are certain procedures where you can, integrate sources into your PowerPoint presentation, which highlights the importance of the age, which highlights the importance of the stages also in teaching, like starting from the ethics, moving on to mechanics, and continuing with rhetorics with the rhetorical teaching, especially when students gain that voice in their production. So thank you very much for that insight, Dr. Çelik.
Thank you so much for your comment. And now we're going to end here, but I'd like to turn to the panelists once again, and I'd like to ask if there was a one message that you should give, what would that be? So your closing remarks with one big message, what would it be in relation to pedagogical approaches to promote academic integrity? Yes, this better really start.
Okay, so I'll just end with the word holistic. So it's really important that academic integrity isn't covered by one thing or one person or in one way. It really needs everybody working together.
Thank you.
I will go with honestly. In Turkish, we have a good proverb. Dürüstlük her zaman kazanır. Honesty always wins. This is the case.
Thank you.
I would say, as a reminder, it's all our responsibility. I think we should take every opportunity, not just in academia, in our houses, at the street. We should take every opportunity to contribute the development of ethical understanding, ethical thinking.
All right. Thank you so much. With these closing remarks, we're saying goodbye. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.